Welcome to Payroll Setup Lesson number 15 on setting up employees. You can see I'm in the Payroll Center, and now that we have the rest of our payroll set up, we're going to start entering employees. So I'm going to click on the happy face for our employees, and as this comes open, I want to make sure we're working in the General tab first and go from left to right as we set up our workers in here. Now, if you haven't set up any workers in here, the first thing I want you to do is put a check mark in this Import Class Information checkbox, because then as we select classes for our different workers, all the related information, their pay rates, their taxes, their benefits, their deductions, everything will automatically be added to the employee setup, so you don't have to do them individually. It's a nice important tab to have there. If you're non-union, you may still want to click that on. It's going to be a personal preference whether you want that on or not. Just depends on how much customizing you have to do on an individual worker by worker basis. So, as you can see in here, I already have employees set up. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, go over the setup, and then we'll enter a new employee. So I can double click on an existing employee to bring their information down into these tabs. Okay, so the information that you see on this General tab is just general. They're an active employee. There's their first name, middle name, last name, and kind of a short name for reports. Number of exemptions. Direct deposit. Now, we haven't even talked about direct deposit yet, but if this employee will have direct deposit, it can actually be turned on or off if the employee sometimes has it or doesn't have it or whatever. But this is what triggers the direct deposit for an employee to be calculated. Now, as I press enter through these fields, basically what's happened here is, as I have selected the class from this drop-down, remember the worker classes that we just did, as we selected the class for the worker, then all of their other setup for their pay rates, their taxes and union benefits, deductions automatically came over with that class, which is really cool. Now we can customize further at this point. So if we have an individual deduction that's not attached to the employee, we can do that at this time, after the employee is set up, I should say. The departments, remember the departments that we talked about earlier in lesson 4. You can assign the worker to a specific department, to a specific location, assign a specific title to them from your titles tab in lesson 6. Then the state here, this can be the state that they live in, which can be changed. So if they're paid in a different state, don't worry about that. We can handle that in the taxes tab, okay? So that's a state that they live in, and then with that state, then you can select the specific filing status. And again, this can be customized in all these other tabs. So as we've pressed enter through the fields, then that Human Resources tab comes open where we can enter more information about this employee. So many of these fields are very obvious. I can just enter through them. But we do have some fields I think you'll find useful, like if they have a visa, or what their license number is, or who their supervisor is. But we also have things like the Equal Opportunity Employer drop-down denoting what type of person they are, and are they a citizen, or do they have a visa, that kind of thing, what gender. And even these can be active for you, so that you can put in their date of birth when they were born, their hire date, which is more important. So if you wanted to have the payroll program doing the time off accrual, it's really based on their hire date. So you want their hire date to be accurate if you're going to use time off accrual in the program. Their last review date, their next review date, if they were terminated, you can enter a date in there. Even termination notes you can have on file for them. So you can always enter an employee and then resave them, even if you have to come back later and enter some of this information. So once the employee is entered, and by the way, I should talk about this. When you enter a new employee, you click the New Employee button, which clears the screen and allows you to enter new information. But once an employee is entered, it is displayed in this list where you can double click on them and then again go through any of these tabs related to the employee. So if we go into the pay rates tab, you can see all of the company pay rates, but these are the ones that were attached to the employee for when we selected the class of worker. Now I'm going to just delete this one out of there. So I'm going to double click on the pay rate and click the delete button here over at the right. Okay. But the other thing you can do with any individual's pay rates is in this employee pay rates tab, double click on them, and you can customize the pay rate and even the expense account for the pay rate for this particular employee. But generally you won't be changing the expense accounts. You're going to let payroll do all the calculation and all the general ledger breakouts. So if it's set, it's set. Don't change the expense account for the pay rate. Okay. Now if we go into the employer liabilities tab, you can see all the company employer liabilities, and these are the ones that are attached to this specific employee through the worker class that was originally set up. So you can see that you can double click through these and you can make them active or inactive over at the right and resave them. You can also delete when out of the employee setup. So you can do that with any deduction, liability, tax. Well, I don't know why you'd want to do it with taxes, but you could. Now if I move on to the taxes tab and I go into the employee taxes, you can see all the employee taxes set up for the employee when we attach the employee to a class. Now the important thing about the taxes, this is very important, otherwise you won't see any taxes calculated on the payroll, is you need to go through the employee taxes one by one and make sure that the filing status is not blank. Okay, so if you cruise over here the first time you set up the employee, these will be blank. So what you need to do is double click on each one of them, and then at the right not only put in the exemptions for that tax, and if there's any additional tax to be calculated, you can enter that there. The filing status, this is for that particular tax, and then as I hit enter I'm prompted to save this. So the important thing again is make sure that none of the filing statuses is blank. Even the two FICAs, you want to make sure that the not applicable shows up in there and that you resave it, because what this means is that unlike federal and state taxes, the two FICAs are calculated regardless of what the filing status is, but it cannot be blank here. Alright, so just make sure you double click through these, set the exemptions and the filing status for each of the taxes. If you forget, we'll catch it on the pay run report when we do our test pay run. Okay, very simple. Now let's go into deductions. Alright, these are the employee deductions that were attached to the employee through the worker class. And again, just like anything else, we can double click on them and we can change anything about them. Okay, so if this individual has their own rate or wants an additional amount taken out, you can do that in these fields here. Now the year-to-date is kind of a neat field, because if an employee's deduction is supposed to stop after a certain amount being taken out during the year, then you can set this deduction up with the full amount of the deduction to be taken out, and you will see this deduction being reduced each pay run, and when it hits 0 it will stop taking the deduction out, which is really cool. But I'll just put it back at 788. So again, just go through these fields, resave anything after you've made your changes. to customize it on the employee level. Okay? Benefits, same kind of thing. Oh, well, let me go back to deductions for just a moment because I had another thought. Now maybe this employee has a credit union deduction that not everybody else has. You can come into the company deductions tab, select that deduction or those deductions that are to be attached directly to the employee. So once you've selected them by putting a check mark here at the left, you click the Add button. It adds them into the Employees Deductions tab here, and then you can double click on it and again customize his particular deduction amount or rate or whatever it is. Very good. Benefits. Same kind of thing over here. The benefit was added to the employee automatically because it came over from the worker class, or if you have a number of benefits and you want to add them individually to the worker, you can check them over here, click your Add button, and then they will show up in the employee benefits, where you can double click then and customize their own rate or amount or whatever it is. There you go. You can always keep notes about an employee on file here. You will also begin to see pay history as the employee starts getting paid. So what you're going to see in the pay history is each time they're paid, you'll see a record in here. You will see their check number and the information related to the payroll. You can also preview that check that's on file for that pay run. So you can see that pay run right here and everything that was calculated for that employee on that particular check. Pretty cool. You can also highlight any pay run that you see in this list, and you can get a list of the hourly detail, which jobs they went to, those hours went to. All that information is available and can be printed out too. So you always have access to this information even after the fact, which is really cool. Now, time off. When we click in the time off tab, if the time off record was attached to the worker class, it will also appear in here with a check mark here. So this check mark indicates that this time off record is attached to the employee. Now what you need to do is double click on it though, and because you'll probably want to start it out with the accrued information up to date, up to today's date or the date that you're going to start your payroll. So if you have employees that have been working with you for a while who've accrued time off in the past, then you want to start your COBRA payroll with the accrued information in this tab. So after I double click on the accrual record over on the left, I just press enter down to the year-to-date hours accrued. I enter what they've accrued to date. I press enter and I enter the year-to-date remaining hours, which should be the same as the accrued hours, and then I can save that here. Now if you have many different accrual or time off records in here, you'll see them all listed, but only the ones with a check mark in there means that they've been set up over here on the right. So if you have like sick time accrual, you can double click on it, and once you resave it with their accrued time off and time remaining, it will place it, and resave it I should say, it will place a check mark in it over at the left. Then you know that this employee is set up with active time off records. Now direct deposit, we're going to handle that in a little bit because there's some setup up front that needs to be done first. So I'll leave that for now. That ends the lesson on setting up employees.